So you want to run an intrigue-heavy game filled with mysteries, suspense, and sanity-shattering elder chores, but you've read on the internet that it's hard for new game masters to run a Call of Cthulhu campaign. Well, today we're going to debunk those myths and give you 5 easy tips for new game masters, also known as keepers. Here for Call of Cthulhu on Game On. Hi everybody, my name is Justin. Welcome to Game On, a show all about tabletop gaming from RPGs to board games and everything in between. Today we will be talking about 5 tips that I wish I had known as a new keeper for Call of Cthulhu, and I'm going to give them to you so that you can be less stressed about running a Call of Cthulhu campaign. Now, just as a side note, keeper and game master are the same thing in this term. So the Call of Cthulhu game master is called the keeper. So if you hear me call it a keeper, assume I mean game master. And if you hear me say game master, assume I mean keeper. They're both one and the same. So let's get into the 5 tips that I want to give you to have a successful campaign in Call of Cthulhu. So this first tip in hindsight seems like a no-brainer, but at the time I didn't really think about that. And that is, if you are new to writing a Call of Cthulhu campaign, best thing to do that I can give you as a suggestion is to take pre-written modules that are already out there and put them together as a campaign. And how you can link them all up is give yourself some sort of wealthy benefactor or government agency that is in charge of the players or the investigators. The player characters in Call of Cthulhu are called investigators. So you can already take these pre-written modules. You don't have to do a lot of the heavy work. The heavy lifting is done, and all that you have to do is now use your creative juices to figure out a way to put them together. Again, a wealthy benefactor like a private eye company or a government agency sending these investigators all over the world is a really great way to create an easy to go campaign. It's basically all pre-written. It's just up to you to connect the dots. And once you get more and more into it and more confident in yourself, that's when you can start writing your own adventures. Now this goes for a lot of different RPGs out there, but I really feel like Call of Cthulhu does a great job of allowing you to tie them all into each other. Okay, so hear me out for tip number 2. You're going to be very tempted to have, Nyarlathotep or Azathoth or the King in Yellow or Cthulhu himself come into this campaign. It is hard for us as players to kind of wrap our heads around such a mind-numbingly powerful god. As players, as investigators, it's hard to run a elder god in a campaign. I've tried, it's not easy. I suggest actually starting a little bit smaller and simpler. Why not use the cultists of those gods as the villains? You're trying to help stop the cultists from bringing the elder gods to our reality, to our dimension. So you're not necessarily dealing with the elder gods per se, you're dealing with the humans who are trying to bring the elder gods to us. That makes it a little bit more intimate, a little bit more close-knit, something that we can understand as humans, as players, because we deal with humans all the time. So just add a little bit of a fanaticism and craziness to them, and that's something that we can easily wrap our heads around. And it might even be like a sympathetic villain. Sometimes these cultists are doing it because they think they're doing it right. They think that they're doing something good for the world. And that is something that can help drive the player characters, the investigators, to really think about helping these NPCs, not necessarily having to fight them, but maybe trying to stop them and maybe even rehab them. Bringing it small, tight with humans as really the villains really makes the game close to home. And it's not like trying to fight dragons like in D&D. It's trying to save these souls who think that they're doing the right thing when in the end, the world's just going to end with them doing what they're trying to do. I do believe combat should be kept to a minimum in Call of Cthulhu. It should be there to help enhance and tell the story. It's kind of like salt. where you add a little bit of salt on something just to help bring out the flavor, but if you put too much into it, it becomes kind of a gross mess. I have the problem in RPGs, or at least in my younger game mastering days, where I would throw random encounters into my games because I thought that's what was fun. That's what the game was all about. But in Call of Cthulhu, combat is incredibly dangerous. You might only have somewhere between 8 and 11 hit points, where a handgun can do a couple d6 worth of damage. An enchanted dagger might do 5d10 worth of damage. A weapon or a monster might do 5d10 worth of damage plus their build 5 times in a round. So it's very important that you keep your combat to a minimum, because you don't want to just throw it at your players, because there's a chance that they could die or they could get severely injured. But sprinkling combat in there, or a chase scene in there with some combat, is very important to help drive the story forward. There's some combat in, let's say, Indiana Jones, but it's not a combat-heavy movie, but there is combat in it to kind of help break up the pace as well as help tell parts of the story. And if you are interested in seeing a Call of Cthulhu game, or being in one, why not join my Patreon? I'll have a link to it up here, and you can be part of my Dark Streets of Arkham campaign. We only have a couple seats left. It's a $5 a month Patreon to help with the video production here, as well as help me run a really good campaign. We got 3-4 players right now. I have about 2 more slots open, so if you're really interested in the game, and if we get more people, I'm willing to open up another table, and we will be broadcasting that. So if you're interested in playing or even just watching a Call of Cthulhu campaign, join my Patreon or stay tuned on this channel. One of the biggest criticisms people give on Call of Cthulhu, and one of the reasons why they think it's not a game that can help sustain a long-term campaign, is because you spend sanity and luck like currency in this game. And once it goes away, you're pretty much screwed. But I like, in my campaigns too, roughly every third adventure, give my player characters some downtime where they can get their luck back, they can gain some of their sanity back. That gives a great way for players to roleplay what their characters do when they're not trying to save the world. Trust me, that change of pace is actually quite nice when it comes to a suspense horror mystery game like this, where you can kind of take a breather and just roleplay what your characters would be doing. Sometimes they might just go back to their real life jobs just for a little bit, just to kind of feel better. They gain their sanity and their luck back. I say you roll 4d6 and then drop the lowest, and that's how much sanity and luck you can get back. I know that's not necessarily how the book does it. You can follow the books if you would like, but I really think that it is important for your player characters to be able to get that currency back so that they can have more fun, spend it, and not go insane after the third adventure. And number 5, incredibly important, is Session 0, Session 0, Session 0. I've said this multiple times. We had a whole video, Matt and I made a whole video about how important a Session 0 is. Call of Cthulhu deals with a lot of things. Depending on what time, like what era you're playing in, there could be racism, there could be sexism. You're dealing with mind stuff. You know, some people have a hard time with mental sanity. Some people find it offensive when you start talking about phobias and when you start talking about anxiety, because some of us actually have this kind of stuff and we're trying to role play it out. And it's important that all the players are on board and the game master / keeper understands what the players don't want. It can, just like any RPG, it can quickly go downhill if you start putting things into the game that your players aren't comfortable with. Like I said, that's for any RPG. But if you're going to put this game in like the 1920s era, the classic era, there's a lot of stuff that happened in the 1920s all over the world that treated certain groups of people not well, to put it mildly. And then there was a lot of really nasty stuff out there. A lot of people recovering from PTSD from World War I, and just the flu, the Spanish flu that wiped out a good chunk of people. It touches on subjects that are kind of difficult, and there's a lot of body horror in it. That some of the Eldritch Gods do crazy things. They'll eat you alive. They'll burst out of your chest. Some people don't want that. So that's why I think a session 0 is super duper important. Now, I am going to give 5 tips for new players in an upcoming video, so don't forget to hit that subscribe button and hit that bell so that you know when that comes out. This is more for keepers, but I will have one for players. I want to hear from you guys in the comments below. Would any of these tips help you as a new keeper? Do you have any tips that you would like to give to new keepers for Call of Cthulhu? I am Justin. I thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for watching. Game on. This is such a fun show for us to do. I love Call of Cthulhu. I love talking about it. I'm so thankful that you guys watched. Don't forget to grab some dice, make yourself an investigator, and game on.